10 seconds left. Tajay pivots. The freshman Jackson. Here's Stevens. Step back. He did it again. With 3.4, Colorado State leads by 1.
You have got to be kidding me. This guy is in the zone.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to Basketball in the Mountains. I am your host, Tyler King, the college sports reporter for the Denver Gazette. This is episode 7, and it is a solo edition, just me on the podcast today. I wanted to get a quick episode up ahead of Colorado State's big game against Boise State tonight. Recording this on Friday, March 7th, the last game of the regular season for the Rams, who are officially back on the NCAA Tournament bubble. I have been hesitant to talk about this a little bit and on the podcast because of the Rams potentially being an at-large team, because of just the resume they had and the fact that it just really felt like, despite how well they have been playing, and I'll talk about this a little bit, and they have been playing really, really well, it felt like they were always going to have to win the Mountain West Tournament in Las Vegas to earn another trip back to the NCAA Tournament, a second straight trip to the NCAA Tournament, and a third one in the span of 4 years, which would just be really awesome and impressive for Niko Medved and the entire Rams program, who I have enjoyed covering since I moved to Colorado. Probably my favorite team and program I get to cover, and I've covered them a lot this season with how well they've been playing, particularly lately. Just a lot of good people up there. Moby Arena is awesome, great environment, really underrated college basketball program, and the Rams are on the cusp of making it back to the NCAA Tournament. I hadn't really even seen them on various projections on teams like even on the fringe of the bubble, like I'm talking teams deep in the late 70s, 80s, early 80s of teams that would be considered, number of teams that would be considered for the tournament. But now today, Joe Lunardi on ESPN puts his updated bracketology up, and Colorado State next 4 out, and the top team right there at the next 4 out. So the 5th team out of the NCAA tournament are the Rams. So I was wrong. I think now for sure there is a path for the Rams to get into the NCAA tournament as an at-large team, and it all starts tonight at Extra Mile Arena in Boise against the Broncos. The Rams really need to win this game. They need to win this game tonight to keep their at-large hopes alive, or else they're going to the Mountain West Tournament next week in Vegas, hoping to steal a bid and be a bid stealer. They just simply do not have the resume. There's no real signature win away from home, really. I mean, you just kind of look at what happened early in the season, and none of this was unexpected, I would say. Like, they started 3-3. They had the 3-game losing streak against an NCAA tournament team in Ole Miss, which was essentially a road game, despite it technically being a neutral site. And then you have the back-to-back losses, one at home to UC Riverside, and then another one at a neutral site against Washington. And then, in December, you have back-to-back losses against at CU and Boulder and against VCU on a neutral site game. So I think if you give CSU one of the wins against UC Riverside and Washington, and either at Colorado or on neutral site against VCU, and they're probably in the last 4 in right now with how well they played in Mountain West play. 15-4 conference, a new program record for conference wins in a season. They've won 6 straight. They've beaten every good team in the conference except New Mexico, and they've beaten all the teams on the road that they really should have this season. Their only road losses are at San Diego State, at New Mexico, and at Utah State in Mountain West play. And obviously their other loss is at home to New Mexico, which was late in 2024. But since the start of 2025, this Rams team has just been really, really impressive. A complete team. And this is something that Niko Medved has talked about a lot post-game after some of these big wins, whether it was the blowout win over to Utah State last Saturday, which I was in attendance for, or San Jose State, another demolition of a not very good, admittedly, Mountain West team. But the Rams did what they were supposed to do against lesser competition and beat the brakes off them, frankly. I was there for that game as well. And what Niko Medved has said after a lot of these games is he knew at the beginning of the season, this is something he told me as well, that he knew this team was probably going to have some struggles and bumps in the roads at the beginning, but he did really feel like the roster he had put together, he and his staff had put together, was capable of getting better throughout the season and becoming a really, really good team by the time March rolled around. And look where we are. It's March 7th. We're a week in. The conference tournaments are already underway, and some of the other mid majors. Mountain West gets underway next week. All the high majors as well will be taking place, and then we're less than 2 weeks away from the start of the NCAA tournament. And here the Rams are as true contenders to make the NCAA tournament now as a bubble team. But like I said, it starts tonight against Boise State, and then if the Rams do end up winning tonight, they will clinch the 2 seed in the Mountain West tournament. And I think if they are able to get to the final of the Mountain West tournament and not get blown out, whether it's against New Mexico or somebody else, and beating a team like Utah State likely in the semifinals of the Mountain West tournament, a neutral site game. Probably, I don't think that would be a quad one game, or might be a quad. It actually right now might be a quad one game, a quad one win, which the Rams just don't have. They only, I don't think they have any quad one wins right now. Right now, they're 0-5, but 6-2 in quad two games. But tonight, a road win at Boise State would qualify as a quad one win. And then if you beat Utah State in probably the semifinals of the Mountain West tournament, that's another quad one win. And then if you keep it close, have a competitive game with a team like New Mexico or Boise State again, or San Diego State, whoever it is, I think there are legitimately 5 teams that could win the Mountain West tournament. Then I think the Rams definitely have a shot to be one of the last teams in. They'd probably be going to Dayton if I had to guess for a second straight season. If that is the case and they don't end up going on to win the Mountain West tournament, they probably would be heading to Dayton. But hey, it's a trip back to the NCAA tournament, and we saw what the Rams did last year against Virginia, just demolishing the Cavaliers there, and before eventually losing to Texas in Charlotte a couple days later. But it was an NCAA tournament win for the program's resume, for Niko Medved's resume, and all around a fun night there for Dayton. I got to be there for that as well. So, like I said, the path to an at-large bid starts tonight at Boise State. Just a huge, huge game, not just for the keeping the Rams at large and keeping this momentum at large bid going and keeping this momentum going. But it also has huge seeding implications for the NCAA tournament, or not the NCAA tournament, excuse me, the Mountain West tournament, because although CSU right now is at 15-4 in Mountain West play, they are a game ahead of both Utah State and Boise State. Obviously, if they lose to Boise State, they're tied, and Boise State would have the tiebreaker, given that they beat New Mexico and CSU didn't. And the same goes for Utah State. If Utah State obviously plays Air Force tomorrow in their regular season finale, likely going to win that one. So if you have 3 teams tied at 15-5 for the second place in the Mountain West, CSU would actually be last out of those 2 teams because they did not beat New Mexico. I don't think Utah State didn't beat New Mexico, but the tiebreaker is the way it works out. CSU would be the 4 seed, which is just really tough because then you have to play New Mexico in the semifinals if you get there, and you have to play probably almost certainly San Diego State in the quarterfinals. So none of that. That's a much, much tougher road. And obviously, like I mentioned earlier, in that scenario, you're also going to Vegas knowing you need to win the Mountain West tournament to be a bid stealer, because if you lose at Boise State, the resume just isn't strong enough to likely get an at-large bid, despite how quickly they have now gotten onto the bubble here and gotten onto the national radar for all these people who do the bracketology things. I mean, I mostly look at Ken Pom and Bart Torvik's rankings. This T ranks CSU is up to 56 now, and Ken Pom they're top 50 now in T rank. There's plenty of sites you can look at for efficiency ratings and all that kinds of stuff. Those are the 2 sites that I have used throughout my time covering college basketball, just been the most reliable. But the Haslam rankings has CSU in the top 50, and they have a momentum category as well, where CSU is number 2 in the nation in momentum, which just shows how well they've been playing. Obviously, they've won 6 straight. They've only lost 2 games dating back to January when they lost at San Diego State at Viejas. They never really were in that game, but since that game, they've just really been rolling, and it's hard to deny how good they've been. They're 11-1, I think, or 11-2 since that game at Viejas in January, and they're just a complete roster, a complete team. Nick Clifford, I don't think he'll win Mountain West Player of the Year, but he has as good of a case as anybody in the conference. I think it'll probably end up going to Donovan Dent, who's been awesome for the Lobos. I've been a fan of him, for a few years now. I thought he was their best player last year when for their NCAA tournament team that didn't live up to the hype and lost in the first round after they were a bid stealer last year, making a dramatic run in the Mountain West tournament to get in, and but they did end up losing in the first round. But I've been a fan of Dent since before last season even, and he's certainly deserving as well. But they've got a star, the Rams do, in Nick Clifford, and you've got a bunch of really, really good complementary players around him that are capable of going off on a given night, whether it's Jalen Lake, who had the game-winning three-pointer in the reverse fixture, to borrow a term from the Premier League soccer, against Boise State earlier this season at Moby. He hit the game winner. And I'll talk a little bit about that game because I do want to preview tonight's game as well, despite the fact that it's starting in about 6.5 hours from the time I'm recording this, less than that from the time you'll be listening to this. But Jalen Lake hit the game winner that night. He's capable. He's averaging close to 12 points a game. If he's hitting his threes, he's definitely capable of going off for close to 20 points over that. Kyan Evans has been a really, really improved player as a sophomore guard. Jalen Crocker-Johnson and Rashawn Bemba are both capable of putting up big nights, whether it's in the post or shooting the ball as well, specifically for Crocker-Johnson, who's become a really good three-point shooter here for the Rams recently. And then you got guys, really veteran guys off the bench that have been around the game and have done a lot of winning at their respective previous stops, like Bowen Bourne, who's come on strong lately, the Northern Iowa guy who was a star in the Missouri Valley Conference and has accepted a bench role for the Rams in his 5th and final year of eligibility and has shined, at times when Kyan Evans has gotten in foul trouble and has come off the bench to be a really valuable backup point guard for this team. Same goes for a guy like Ethan Morton, who was once a starter at Purdue, a team that made the Final Four last year, and was a prize recruit out of my home state of Pennsylvania. Just one of the better defenders in the Mountain West, and he's even started to put the ball in the basket a little bit more lately, hitting a three the other day against San Jose State, just kind of letting it rip off the catch in the second half of that blowout win for the Rams. So they're a deep team. They've got plenty of guys that can go off, and they've got a star in Nick Clifford. And I think one of the things I'll talk about next week when I'll likely have a guest on to preview the Mountain West tournament, because I think it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. I think whoever plays the best, whichever star plays the best in Vegas, that team will probably end up winning, whether it's Nick Clifford or Donovan Dent with New Mexico, like I mentioned, or Tyson Degenhart, who I'll talk a little bit about. I get more today for Boise State, or Ian Martinez or Mason Falslev, either of those guys for Utah State. I'm not so sure San Diego State has the superstar needed maybe to win this tournament next week, which I'll talk more about later on a different episode. But the Rams have one of the best players in the conference and one of the best, honestly, players in the country in Nick Clifford, who's just putting up certain stats that you don't see, that you just don't see. He's averaging almost 18 points a game, just under 10 rebounds per game, essentially 10 rebounds per game, and over 4 assists per game. And all those numbers have been going up in Mountain West play, as he's just kind of been the catalyst of this really, really impressive conference season that they've had, which is, like I said, a program record, 15 conference wins. And now, granted, the conference is not as good as it has been in previous years. They're not going to get 6 bids this year. They're going to get 3, likely 3 guaranteed, I think, and at most 4 if there's a bid stealer and Boise State or CSU sneaks in kind of the final in the last 4 and goes to the first 4 in Dayton. So it's definitely not as deep as a league as it has been, but still a super, super impressive coaching job by Niko Medved and his staff. They've just done a great job. Now they're for the better part of almost a decade in Fort Collins, and they've become one of the best programs in the conference. And that's why the reason they've been competing with the likes of San Diego State and New Mexico, and Utah State, who's been really good too, and Boise State as well under Leon Rice. So, but yeah, like I said at the top, it all starts tonight against Boise State on the road. And it's going to be a fascinating matchup. I think there's a couple key things to watch for. This Broncos team is really top heavy. They have two of the best players in the conference, two guys who might be first team, one for sure, and another guy who might be first team All Mountain West. Tyson Degenhardt, who I mentioned earlier, had 27 points against the Rams in Fort Collins earlier this season. Alvaro Cardenas, the point guard, veteran guy who's been around the conference, was at San Jose State before, now is in his last year of eligibility at Boise State. He had 18 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds in that game. I mean, anybody who remembers that game, CSU was up big. I think they're up by as many as 18 in the second half. I was there for that one. And Boise State just really mounted a comeback and dug deep and got their way back into the game through Degenhardt and Cardenas, mostly Degenhardt. He was 10 of 17 from the field, 6 of 7 from the line. The Rams just didn't really have a ton of answers for him, and it wasn't really due to a lack of foul trouble for the big guys, which can happen despite the Rams having good, really solid depth now at the 4 and the 5 with Jalen Crocker-Johnson starting and Rashawn Bemba starting with, bringing Nikola Joppa off the bench. Same for Kyle Jorgensen, the freshman. They've got really good depth. Rashawn Bemba did not play in that game against Boise State earlier this season, but not a ton of foul trouble against Degenhardt, but he was just kind of a load to handle in the post, kind of getting whatever he wanted to lead Boise State back into that game. They scored 43 points in the second half. And like I mentioned earlier, we're talking about Jalen Lake. They needed that three-pointer by him to win the game. It was tied in the final seconds. Nick Clifford drives to the basket, can't get it to go. He thought he was fouled. Crocker-Johnson gets the offensive rebound, kicks it out to Lake. He hits the game winner. Boise State had a chance to get one at the buzzer, but it obviously didn't go down. So this is definitely not going to be an easy game. Boise State is also a team that has played really well. CSU has got the longest winning streak in the conference at 6 games. Boise State's right behind them they've won 5 in a row, including beating them. It started against New Mexico at home. They got beat up pretty good at San Diego State earlier in February. Then they beat New Mexico at home, and they've kind of rattled off a bunch of impressive wins here, including another one against Utah State at home, and then beating up on some of the dregs of the Mountain West on the road. And now they wrap it up with CSU tonight. So going to be a really, really interesting game. I think just with how these games have gone on the road lately for the Rams, you're going to need Nick Clifford, I think, to be not at his best, but playing really well. And then you're going to need, whether it's Jalen Lake or Kyan Evans or Jalen Crocker-Johnson, one of those guys to have a big night offensively to kind of pull off. I'm not sure if there's a line yet for this game, but it would be a little bit of an upset, I would think, considering how good Boise State has been at home lately and just good overall. But great. It's going to be a great matchup tonight on 8 p.m. FS1. Boise State 6.5 point favorite. There you go. I just pulled up the spread. So it would definitely be an upset if the Rams are able to pull it off and keep this great streak going heading into the Mountain West tournament. But yeah, just thanks everybody for listening. I will be following along with tonight's game in Boise. I'm covering the University of Denver hockey's rivalry game against Colorado College, but I will be tuned in to what's going on in Boise while I'm there, and I'll be tweeting out and on Blue Sky, posting updates throughout the game. So make sure to follow me over there. And thanks everybody for listening. Yeah, just want to get this quick, solo episode up ahead of this game tonight, especially given the fact that all the indications are that the Rams, if they are able to get a win tonight, will really put themselves in good position to potentially get one of those last spots in the NCAA tournament if they're not able to win the Mountain West tournament next week in Las Vegas. So once again, thanks everybody for listening. Please make sure to rate, review, subscribe wherever you like to get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, or if you like to watch all these episodes on YouTube, I appreciate it as well. Comment if you'd like. Let me know what more you would like to hear about on the podcast, guests you'd like to hear from, teams you want me to talk about. I'll certainly take all of that into consideration as I'm looking to just make this what everybody wants it to be, which I hope people have enjoyed it so far. I've enjoyed doing it so far. There's a lot of really good teams to talk about and a lot of good people that I have had on so far and would like to have on in the future, hopefully coming up soon to talk about the postseason for college basketball, because I think it's going to be a really fun week of conference tournaments next week. And then A week after that, the NCAA tournament is going to be here in Denver. I will be here covering that, unless I'm covering maybe CSU wherever they land in the NCAA tournament. We'll see about that. But yeah, so like I said, thanks again for listening. Rate, review, subscribe, and everybody have a good day and enjoy the weekend of basketball.